I worked the night maintenance shift at a Walmart just off the highway, one of those stores surrounded by empty land and dark trees, where the parking lot lights feel too small for the space they're trying to protect. The store closed at midnight, but we stayed until 4 in the morning, cleaning aisles, scrubbing floors, and waiting for daylight with music playing softly through our earbuds. Around 2:30 that morning, I was mopping near the back emergency exit by seasonal storage, the one customers never really notice, when the door alarm chirped even though no one was nearby. At first I assumed someone had leaned against it earlier and it finally settled, so I walked over and pushed the heavy metal bar to check the lock. The moment I cracked the door open, cold air poured inside, far colder than it should have been for late summer, and I could see the parking lot outside completely empty, except for my own car and a line of shopping carts glowing faintly under the lamps. Something felt off. The way everything outside looked flat and silent, like it was waiting for me to step out. So I pulled the door shut again and finished mopping, telling myself I was just tired. 15 minutes later, as I worked my way toward grocery, I noticed faint footprints on the freshly cleaned floor behind me, appearing slowly one pair at a time like someone was following just out of sight. But when I turned around, the aisle was empty, and the prints stopped abruptly, as if whoever made them had vanished mid-step. My radio crackled in my pocket, but instead of my supervisor's voice, I heard a low hum, almost like breathing pressed too close to a microphone, and then silence. Trying not to panic, I decided to report it to the night manager, but when I reached the front, the service desk lights flickered, and every register screen briefly turned white, all at once, before returning to normal. That was when the emergency exit alarm went off again, louder this time, echoing through the store, and before anyone else could react, my manager radioed me directly and told me to check the same door again because the security panel said it had been opened from the inside. As I walked back, the lights above the seasonal aisle dimmed one by one behind me, plunging the far end into shadow, and I felt a strange pressure in my ears, like the store was closing in. The emergency exit stood slightly ajar, the metal bar already pushed down, even though I knew I had secured it earlier. Against every instinct I had, I pulled the door open wider and stepped outside, expecting the parking lot, the night air, the distant highway. Instead, I stepped forward and found myself standing inside the store again, in the exact same seasonal aisle, but darker, quieter, and wrong in ways I couldn't immediately explain. The shelves were fully stocked, even though seasonal had been empty hours earlier, the products outdated and dusty, and the floor beneath my boots was sticky as if it hadn't been cleaned in years. Behind me, the emergency door was gone, replaced by an unbroken wall of shelving. Then the store speakers crackled to life and played an automated closing message in a distorted voice, thanking customers for shopping and wishing them a good night, followed by the sound of a door alarm repeating endlessly. I ran. I don't remember how I got back to the front of the store or how much time passed, but I was found sitting on the floor near checkout crying, clutching my radio, while my coworkers stood around me confused and pale. Security footage later showed me opening the emergency exit and stepping outside, but there was no footage of me coming back in. After that night, the emergency exit was permanently sealed off and marked out of service due to sensor malfunction. I quit the following week. Sometimes when I drive past that Walmart after midnight, I swear I see lights on inside and shelves that don't exist anymore, and I never park near the back of the building, because I know some exits don't lead where they're supposed to. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I was working the overnight shift at a Walmart that never closed. A building where time felt like it stopped moving once the sky went dark, and every minute blurred into the hum of lights and refrigeration. Around 3 in the morning, When the store was nearly empty except for a few wandering customers and the skeletal night crew, I was sent to help restock the frozen foods. The aisle was long and narrow, boxed in by glass freezer doors that reflected the same image over and over, endless versions of myself under cold blue lighting. The freezers were louder than usual that night, their motors groaning softly like something straining beneath the floor. As I opened boxes and slid frozen meals into place, the air grew sharply cold, enough to make my fingers numb through gloves. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed one freezer door standing open just slightly, the seal broken, cold fog curling out slowly like breath. I assumed a customer had left it open and pushed it shut without thinking. The door sealed with a hiss, the fog vanished, and the aisle returned to its steady hum. Less than 30 seconds later, I heard the sound again, unmistakable and slow, the heavy glide of glass moving behind me. When I turned, the same door was open again. This time I double-checked it, pushing until the latch clicked, pressing my palm against the glass until I felt the vibration of the motor behind it. I stayed there a moment longer than necessary, watching my reflection ripple faintly in the fogged glass. Nothing else moved. Satisfied, I turned back to my cart. The sound came back immediately. The door didn't swing open suddenly. It crept, dragging itself inch by inch, like something cautious on the other side. The temperature in the aisle dropped fast enough to sting my lungs, and when I breathed out, white mist floated in front of my face. The store's usual noise faded until all I could hear was the freezer's low, hollow hum. I reached for my radio and tried to call another employee, but instead of a voice, static filled my ear, tangled with a faint sound underneath it, irregular and wet, almost like breathing slowed by cold air. I pulled the radio away, checking to see if it was malfunctioning, and that's when I noticed the aisle lights overhead flickering out of sync, dimming just enough to shift every shadow. The freezer door began closing on its own, stopping halfway, then opening again as if someone inside couldn't decide whether to come out or stay hidden. Frost formed thickly along the edges of the glass, blurring what was inside, but through it I could see movement, something standing between the shelves far deeper than the aisle's reflection suggested. The shape leaned closer. It looked human, but wrong, stretched vertically, shoulders too narrow, standing perfectly still as though frozen along with the food inside. The longer I stared, the more my chest tightened, because the figure seemed to be staring back, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I tried to step away and found my legs didn't respond at first. When I finally moved, the floor felt slick beneath my shoes, colder than polished tiles should ever feel. The door slammed fully open, cold air spilling forward in a wave strong enough to make my eyes water. The freezer was empty. No shape, no misplaced items, no sign anyone had been there at all. I backed away hard enough to bump into another employee who had hurried down the aisle. He looked shaken before I said a word and asked who I'd been talking to. When I told him no one was there, he looked past me at the freezer and said he saw me standing there for nearly 2 full minutes, nodding slowly, tilting my head like someone listening. Later, management pulled the security footage. On the screen, the aisle looked normal. The freezer door never opened on its own. I walked up to it, opened it once, and then stood completely still, staring inside for over 2 minutes without moving. No second figure appeared, no reflection, no anomaly. Just me, frozen in place. They blamed exhaustion and wrote it off as a stress reaction. Within a month, that freezer stopped working entirely. It was removed and replaced, but even now, employees avoid stocking that section late at night. The new freezer still forms frost faster than the rest. The aisle always feels colder. Sometimes, when the store grows quiet enough, you can hear glass sliding softly behind you and the hum deepening. as if something inside is waiting again for someone to look back. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I was assigned to clean the stockroom during one of my last overnight shifts at Walmart. A cavernous space hidden behind layers of swinging metal doors where the lights never reached the corners properly, and where the air always smelled faintly of cardboard, dust, and something older that never quite aired out. The store itself was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that only comes after 2 in the morning when customers thin out, and even the hum of conversation disappears, leaving behind nothing but the distant buzz of lights and refrigeration echoing through the corridors. The stockroom was worse. Rows of towering metal shelves stretched into shadow, stacked high with overstocked boxes and unlabeled pallets, forming narrow aisles that felt more like tunnels than pathways. Motion sensors controlled the lights, and they clicked on in sections, leaving the rest in darkness until you stepped forward, giving the unsettling sensation that the room was constantly watching and reacting to where you stood. I pushed my cart down the center aisle, collecting trash, broken shrink wrap, and empty pallets, trying not to think about how isolated the space felt at that hour. Somewhere deeper in the stockroom, a door creaked softly, likely from changing pressure in the building, but the sound carried longer than it should have, rolling through the metal shelves like the echo of footsteps. Then I noticed the mirror. Mounted on a support beam near the employee lockers was a convex safety mirror, meant to help forklift drivers see around corners, something I had passed dozens of times without thinking. That night, however, it didn't reflect the stockroom the way it should have. Instead of showing rows of shelves and my own movement behind me, the mirror displayed a narrow hallway that didn't exist anywhere in the back of the store, dimly lit and stretching away far beyond where the stockroom ended. I stopped walking. In the mirror, I saw myself standing still, but the hallway behind me and the reflection continued further than any wall would allow, its edges warped and darker, fading into shadow. I took a step forward, and my reflected self did the same. But something was wrong. The timing lagged, just enough to notice if you were staring. I lifted my hand slowly. The reflection hesitated before copying the motion. Before I could process what I was seeing, a second figure appeared in the mirror, standing several feet behind my reflected self in the hallway, tall and indistinct, its outline blurred as if smeared by smoke. It didn't move closer, didn't step away. It just stood there occupying the space like it had always been part of that reflection. My heart began pounding so hard that each beat echoed in my ears, filling the silence louder than the store's machinery. I turned around sharply, sweeping my flashlight across the shelves behind me, expecting to see someone standing there in the shadows. But the stockroom remained empty, aisles perfectly still, lights humming without interruption. When I looked back at the mirror, the hallway was closer. The figure behind my reflection had advanced without walking, now standing just a few steps away, close enough that I could make out its unnatural proportions. Arms hanging too low, head slightly tilted, its shape bending subtly as if struggling to hold itself upright. I backed away instinctively, shoes scraping against the concrete floor, my breath coming faster with every step. But in the mirror, my reflection remained frozen, staring forward while the figure behind it leaned closer. Its face stayed indistinct, but I felt the unmistakable awareness of being observed, studied, as though something beyond the mirror was trying to memorize me. The motion sensor lights flickered out. For a second, everything went dark. When the lights snapped back on, the mirror showed only the stockroom again, shelves normal, space empty. My reflection perfectly aligned and moving correctly again. There was no hallway, no second figure, no distortion. Just a piece of polished glass reflecting fluorescent lights. I reported the incident to my supervisor, who reluctantly admitted that the mirror had been taken down twice before after multiple night employees complained about reflections behaving oddly, but every time it was reinstalled because there was no record of damage or malfunction. Security footage from that night showed me standing in front of the mirror for nearly 4 minutes, completely still, head slightly tilted, as if listening to someone speak from somewhere just out of frame. I quit soon after. To this day, I still avoid mirrors late at night, especially convex ones, because every now and then, just when the light hits the glass the wrong way, I swear I see a corridor stretching beyond where the room should end, and something standing patiently at the far edge, waiting for me to look long enough for it to catch up. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I transferred to the overnight cleaning crew after the store stopped being open 24 hours, which meant most nights our only company was silence, humming lights, and the occasional announcement reminding customers the store was closed, even though there were no customers left inside. Around 3:15 in the morning, while polishing floors near electronics, I heard a voice come through the intercom that didn't sound automated, didn't echo properly, and didn't follow the usual script. It calmly said, "Customer assistance needed in lawn and garden." At first I ignored it, assuming a manager had accidentally bumped the microphone. But less than a minute later the announcement played again. Exactly the same tone, same pacing, same calm clarity, repeating the message word for word. I glanced at the front desk where the intercom console sat unattended, its indicator lights dark, the system clearly not in use. My radio crackled as my supervisor asked if anyone was near lawn and garden, saying the intercom system showed activity coming from there, even though it was locked down for the night. Against better judgment, I volunteered to check it, partly because it was on the same side of the store and partly because everyone else hesitated just long enough for me to regret opening my mouth. The walkover felt longer than it should have. The aisles dimmer, the music unusually quiet, and as I passed seasonal clearance, I noticed the clock above the aisle frozen at exactly 12 odds, even though hours had passed since midnight. When I reached the heavy glass doors separating the main store from lawn and garden, they were unlocked, standing open several inches, warm air flowing inward even though the section had no heating overnight. Inside, the garden center looked abandoned and wrong. Shelves half empty, plants long gone, bags of soil torn open and spilling across the concrete like dark stains. Moonlight filtered through the mesh ceiling, but somewhere deeper inside, fluorescent lights flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows that didn't line up with the objects creating them. The announcement played again. This time it came from directly above me, the voice sounding closer, more focused, saying my name at the end of the sentence even though I hadn't told anyone where I was. The radio in my hand suddenly went dead, screen blank, refusing to power on no matter how many times I pressed the button. I called out, asking if anyone was there, and from between stacks of patio furniture I heard footsteps responding, slow and careful, matching my pace instead of approaching. As I moved further in, I realized the exit behind me had slid shut silently, sealing the darkness inside with me. The intercom crackled again, quieter now, almost conversational, instructing me to stand near the center aisle because assistance had arrived. The fluorescent lights buzzed loudly and then steadied, illuminating a section of the floor where muddy footprints appeared one by one, leading out of a dark corner and stopping inches from my shoes. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe, carrying the heavy scent of soil and stagnant water, and something large shifted beyond the shelves, displacing shadows without fully revealing itself. When I finally turned to run, the intercom screamed, repeating the announcement rapidly, overlapping itself, the voice losing its shape until it sounded like a crowd speaking through one mouth. I don't remember reaching the main store, only being shaken awake by my supervisor near customer service, the entire overnight crew standing around me pale and silent. Management pulled logs later and found the intercom showed a live page originating from Lawn and Garden for nearly 7 minutes, but no audio was recorded, only an empty signal looping continuously. The next night, Lawn and Garden was sealed entirely and listed as undergoing maintenance that never seemed to end. I quit a few days later, but sometimes when I'm shopping late and the store grows quiet, I still hear that same calm voice over the speakers, asking for assistance in a department that shouldn't be accessible anymore. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I was scheduled for the overnight security shift during the remodel, which meant the store stayed dark except for emergency lighting and whatever sections the contractors happened to be working in, leaving long stretches of shadowed aisles that felt unfinished and hollow in a way the store never did during business hours. My job was simple. Walk the floor every hour, check doors, watch the cameras, and make sure no one wandered into closed areas while renovations were underway. Around 2:40 in the morning, while monitoring the camera feeds in the security office, I noticed movement in Lawn and Garden, which surprised me because that section was completely closed and chained off until morning. The camera showed a figure walking slowly between pallets of bagged soil, pausing occasionally as if reading shelf labels that hadn't been updated in years. At first, I assumed it was one of the contractors working late, but when I checked the schedule, no one was assigned to that area overnight. I switched to another camera angle to get a clearer view, and the figure disappeared between frames, gone in a way that felt unnatural, not walking out of sight, but dropping entirely from the feed. The timestamp continued normally, no glitch or freeze, and the audio channel registered silence. I leaned closer to the monitor, suddenly aware of how quiet the building had become, as if even the usual mechanical hum had leaned away from whatever was happening. Protocol said I had to investigate. I grabbed the radio and headed toward Lawn and Garden, the emergency lights painting the aisles in dull amber as I moved. The closer I got, the colder the air felt, not freezer cold but drafty, unfinished, carrying the smell of damp concrete and fertilizer. When I reached the chained entrance, it was hanging loose, the padlock resting open on the floor beneath it, still secured properly as though someone had unlocked it and relocked it without bothering to reattach it to the chain. Inside, the garden center felt larger than I remembered, stretched out by darkness, with stacks of soil and mulch forming narrow paths that drew the eye deeper into the space. My footsteps echoed too sharply, and every sound returned just a fraction of a second late, creating the unsettling impression of someone else following my movements from just beyond sight. I called out, identifying myself, but my voice sounded muted, swallowed by the high ceiling and mesh roof above. The radio responded with faint static, and beneath it I caught a whisper that almost sounded like my own words repeating themselves, softened and slowed, like an echo that refused to fade. Then the lights flickered on. A section of fluorescence above the central aisle buzzed to life, illuminating the same path I'd seen on the camera, and at the far end of it stood the figure, facing away from me, perfectly still. They wore employee colors, a vest darkened with stains, their posture slack, head tilted as if listening for instructions only they could hear. I moved closer despite every instinct telling me not to, my footsteps sounding louder with each step, and the figure began to walk forward at the exact same pace, always keeping the same distance between us no matter how fast or slow I moved. The space around us felt compressed, heavy, as if the store itself was closing ranks. Over the radio, a calm voice broke through the static and asked me to confirm visual contact. I answered immediately, describing what I was seeing, but the voice responded with a delay that didn't match the system, asking the same question again in the same tone. When I glanced at the radio display, it showed no active channel, no incoming signal, just a backlit screen glowing faintly green. The figure stopped at the end of the aisle and turned. Its face was wrong, not distorted exactly, but unfinished, as if details had been smoothed away, leaving only enough shape to suggest where features should be. When it spoke, it used my voice, repeating phrases I'd said earlier in the shift, testing them like tools to see which felt right. The lights overhead snapped off. Total darkness pressed down instantly, thick and disorienting, and in it I heard movement all around me. Soft footsteps, fabric brushing against shelves, something breathing too close for comfort. The radio crackled wildly, voices overlapping in clipped fragments, employee announcements repeating out of order, alarms chiming without warning. When the lights came back on, I was alone. I was sitting on the floor near customer service with my back against the counter, my radio crushed in my hand, every screen in the store flashing blue error codes while the emergency systems rebooted. The incident report logged the event as a temporary power anomaly caused by renovation wiring, and the camera footage from Lawn and Garden that night was blank from the moment the lights came on. I finished the week out of obligation and never went back. Sometimes when I shop late and pass near Lawn and Garden, I notice my reflection in the dark glass panels doesn't move when I do, and I keep walking without looking back, because I know some kinds of security never really log out when the store closes. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to NightFear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.